So welcome to Frugal Finance. Today we're going to have a quick look and prediction of what might be in the budget. So Rishi Sunak has got to set the budget on the 3rd of March, and obviously this one is going to be massive in terms of setting our goal, or as the government like to refer to it, the roadmap perhaps, to how all of these various stimulus packages that have been launched are really going to come to an end, and how we're going to sort of pay for them. So without further ado, please smash the like button. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Please do give us a little comment below if there's any questions you want to ask. Without further ado, let's get stuck in. So 3rd of March, that's the date. So Rishi will come on and, or my mate Ricky, will come on and basically set his budget or roadmap to how we're going to pay for all of this stimulus to do with the pandemic. Obviously there are a few key things to consider that I suspect they will probably mention, and I'll give you my thoughts on them. So number one is the stamp duty holiday. Obviously that relates around property. This is a wealth building channel to do with being frugal, and property, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that. So you've got the stamp duty holiday. Obviously there's an awful lot of people that have brought forward their purchases to buy property, and I believe that anybody who probably started a purchase after Christmas, so say mid-January or something, probably is going to really struggle, or borderline got a bat and hell's chance of actually getting their purchase done and exchanged and completed by the 31st of March. You've got to remember, you actually have to have completed, done, dust, everything by the 31st of March. Not exchanged, not agreed a price, not sent your solicitor some money, not started the process. Currently, 31st of March, if you haven't exchanged and completed, so you can exchange and complete on the same day, but basically the completion, then you're not entitled to the discounted stamp duty, and at midnight on that night you will then have to pay it. That's as strict as it gets. Obviously, in my opinion, I think they'll probably do some sort of phasing out. Maybe people that have instructed solicitors, maybe if you've exchanged, maybe if you started the process, or maybe they might consider a reduced amount of stamp duty. So whatever it is, they say it's 5% up to a certain value, and might be 50% less than that, so 2.5%, and then obviously your 1% would become 0.5%, and so on. So that would be there, because I think that the housing market really does stimulate the economy, in my opinion. So it's not just about wealth building and people that can buy property, but you've got to remember that when people move home, they want tradesmen in, they want extra sockets adding, they want extensions built in, they want rooms decorated, they need a guy to come and help them, or a lady to come and help them move all the furniture and the rest of it. So, you know, white van man or removal company of some nature, solicitors, obviously you need them, estate agencies. There are an awful lot of trades and businesses that rely upon the housing market being stimulated and plodding along in a nice pattern. So I do think that there will be something. If you want my kind of final thoughts on the stamp duty thing, I think that there will be some phasing out of it. Whether it's a kind of a massive extension until say September, or a fading out to September, I don't know at this stage, but I don't think there'll be a kind of cliff edge 31st of March, bang, end. Might be wrong, we'll find out in a few weeks, and this video might get rather old. Right, next thing, capital gains tax. So there was an awful lot of talk about capital gains tax being increased. So at the moment you pay a lesser amount of capital gains tax on the capital gains than you would if it was, say, earned money, so from an employer. So what I mean by that is that if you pay 20% tax on your salary, so you get paid, I don't know, £10,000 a year, and you pay 20% tax on it. I know these are just rough figures, okay? I know people will pick me up and you get a tax-free allowance and the rest of it, but £10,000, you pay 20% tax on it, okay? So you pay £2,000 tax. If you made a capital gain, so you bought something and then sold it for something later, Again, there is a tax-free allowance, I am aware of that, but let's keep things simple. So you buy it for £10,000 and you sell it for £20,000, you've made a £10,000 capital gain on that, and there is a tax due on that. Put it bluntly, without getting micro into all of the ins and outs of tax-free allowances and bits and bobs and the rest of it, and some people pay 40% tax and so on. I'm aware of all of that. I'm trying to keep the video simple. If you take your £10,000 capital gain that you've made and your £10,000 salary that you've earned, more often than not, you pay slightly less tax on the capital gains than you do on your salary. Now, in principle, the reason for that is often in order to have the capital gain, some risk factor has got to have gone on, and you could lose that money. So if I put in £10,000 into the stock market and I make £20,000, well, I have stimulated the business that I've put £10,000 into, and hopefully they'll go on and they'll stimulate and they'll make profit and they'll pay tax on that profit. So they're contributing to the system, but I've risked my money. I could lose all of that money. When you're employed and the employer pays you and then the business goes bust 6 months down the line, nobody comes back to the employer and says, well, the reason why we went bust is because we overpaid you, so can we have the money back, please? Whereas here on the capital gains, you've actually lost your money. So there's quite a bit of a difference. However, if you want my opinion on it, I don't really see that big a deal with it. If you make a capital gains and it is currently whatever 28% and there's a phasing of it and so on, remember I'm trying to keep this video simple so don't pick me up on every single figure, but basically I don't see an issue with paying whatever your marginal rate tax is. So if you pay 20%, pay 20%. If you pay 40%, 40%, 45%, 45%. I don't see that being a bigger issue. You've got to remember, in most normal people's scenarios, capital gains tax is actually money that they probably inherited, which is probably somebody else's gain, so actually it's money for them, and you should never really rely upon an inheritance. So obviously that's inheritance tax, but it's a form of capital gains essentially in a way. And then anybody that puts money in the stock market and makes 50% on it, or buys property and then sells it on at a later date, I don't see an issue with that. You know, we've got to pay for this somehow, and you know, paying 20 or 40% tax at your marginal rate seems like a reasonable, fair thing to do for me. I do feel like it might not be the time to mention it now, so it might come in a future budget. So it might be a kind of sprinkling of it at this budget, maybe for a future year. That's my honest thought, but if you ask me, I don't see a big issue with it. It has to be paid for somehow, but whether they mention it this budget or leave it for a future date, I don't know, but I do think it's on the cards. Personal rate of tax. So the next thing I think they will probably talk on is personal rate of tax. Now, in the last manifesto, they said they wouldn't raise VAT and they wouldn't raise personal tax and they wouldn't raise corporation tax. Now, those are the three main taxes. Now, I don't think that they are going to actually look at these, because you've got 40% tax for higher rate payers, and then there's another higher rate above that at 45%. Then you've got 20% tax rate payers, and then you've got 19%, which is corporation tax, and then you've got VAT at 20%, which is obviously reduced. They might reduce VAT to give it a bit of a stimulus and then maybe try and recoup that back at a later date. Got to remember, back in 2010, I think it was, they dropped, it was 17.5%, they dropped it down to 15, and then it's now gone back up to 20. So actually we weren't any better off, but what it did was temporarily stimulate the market back then. So we might see something similar now, but I think that they will probably leave that well alone. I mean, they might raise the 19% corporation tax to 20%, but I do feel that businesses have been absolutely crippled, generally speaking, by the pandemic. So, and if the businesses don't make money, then they don't employ people, they don't pay people, those people don't pay taxes. So it's a cycle. So everybody might think, oh, businesses should pay for it and be taxed and the rest of it. But the reality is that actually businesses and employees and the whole system all revolve around one another. They're all intrinsically linked. What I do think is not intrinsically linked is your big internet companies, which they've set up offshore companies, and they've got clever ways of filtering off tax. And they used to have two thresholds of corporation tax. So they used to have like an upper level. So after, say, £300,000 worth of profit, you paid a different rate to lower. I think that would be probably fair, and there's some way of obviously taxing the really big internet-based companies, which I'm sure you all know who they are, but some way of really recouping that kind of money. So my honest opinion is I think they will leave personal and business and VAT well alone within certain parameters. They might tinker with it a little bit, who knows, but I think they'll probably go after the big boys, if you like, in terms of their millions of pounds of tax that they are dodging, essentially, is how it's seen. I'm sure they're all doing it legitimately, but whether it's morally speaking the right thing to do is another thing. So the next thing, something I've touched on, is the £20 per week top up to universal credit at the moment. Now obviously they've come under an awful lot of pressure to keep this on, and I do think that they will continue to have that pressure right up until the point where it is either due to come to an end or be extended. I think it's a bit of a popular vote, if I'm honest. I know that won't go down very well in the comments, but I think it's a bit of a popular vote for the political parties to keep that in place, and obviously they need to keep people on side. They're losing people are getting bored, getting a bit anxious, getting tired of the restrictions and the rest of it. So to keep them alive and give them a bit of a carrot in front of the donkey to keep going, I think they will probably sustain that £20 a week top up for another year, and then it may drop. My fear is that it will be a bit like the VAT, where it drops more than actually what you've benefited from. So you might get £20 again for another year, then they cap it, it goes back to what it was, which doesn't sound like a bad thing in principle, but you've got to remember what it was is actually the rate that it was at the beginning of 2020, so therefore you've lost 2 years worth of increased amounts or inflation related increases. So effectively at the end you've actually now worse off, because you should have gone up by say 2% or 1% or whatever the inflation rate might be, or RPI or whatever they calculate it out on. So I think that it will probably be recouped that way. So it is a kind of, here's a nice little top up and a treat, and to keep people going along. I mean, I should call it a treat then, but it's not really a treat. Some people are reliant upon that money, but I feel like the day will come where they'll say enough's enough, we have to get rid of that, and then obviously you're now going backwards. So if you're anybody who's reliant upon that money, I would use this time now very wisely to try and cut back on your living expenses, or get yourself in a better position so that you're not reliant upon that money, bearing in mind that may happen and is likely. And in my opinion, I think that's probably what they will do. So they will keep it on, but then they will remove it at a later date, and there will be a negative effect back to about start of pandemic 2020, end of 2019 type levels. So another thing in the budget I think they'll probably touch on is things like permitted development rights and the high street. So obviously the high street has been absolutely decimated with the pandemic. It was on the way down anyway, everybody knows that. But the pandemic has come along and basically just come along with a great big eraser, or rubber if you're English, and just wiped it out really. It's been horrendous. I mean, we have just seen carnage. Debenhams, hundreds of years of trading. I know the Arcadia group, you could argue, is a bit suspicious because obviously all the pensions things that have gone on and the rest of it, but the reality is that has been wiped out. There are other names that have been wiped out. Places were reducing in numbers. Argos are moving away from having standalone stores, they're going inside Sainsbury's and so on. Everybody is losing money on the high street. And the people that are making the money are the people that are not on the high street. So your Amazons and your Etsy's and all those kind of companies, and Boohoo and stuff. You can see they're mopping up all of these high street retail and brands and names, but they're not taking the premises. So I think there'll be some stimulus for the high street, possibly, business rates extension. Obviously that comes to an end in March, and if that ends and people have to start paying business rates in March, there will be, in my opinion, there will just be an absolute sea of people just chucking the towel. or small independents and medium-sized businesses will just literally just chuck in the towel if they've got to start paying, tens of thousands of pounds of business rates again. Hospitality industry will be the same. Pubs will start closing. So I think that will be extended. So extension to business rates, holiday, or some form of extension. And then secondly, I think there'll be a little bit of revitalising the high street in that sense, whether it's purely business rates or some other incentive. But I do think there'll also be a bit of a relaxation on planning regulations for these massive buildings. So if you've got the likes of, say, a Debenhams that was, I don't know, over 7 or 8 floors with 6 lifts in it and, various departments and a restaurant, and nobody is going to want to take that on. Nobody. That store, that mythology, that structure of store is for the dinosaurs, really. Nobody goes to Debenhams and wants everything all in one place anymore. There aren't many stores like that anymore, really. And if they are, they tend to be real out of town, or, in the big industrial estates and stuff. I mean, I've noticed Marks and Spencer's seem to be doing that in the industrial estates where they're buying it and then putting a mezzanine floor in. It's nothing in comparison to some of the Debenhams, especially down in the south of the UK, where you've got these massive stores, absolutely humongous things, floors and floors of it, and now they're completely empty. I can't imagine that anybody will take those on. So I think a relaxation to revitalise those style buildings where you've got maybe conversion into residential on the upper floors and then commercial on the ground floor, much smaller premise. I think they need to remove some of the red tape for that, and I think that will probably be in the budget, because there's already been some indications towards the Type E or E-class registrations for businesses and for premises. There's been permitted development rights at the back of buildings, roof extensions, all those kind of things. They've already been touched on, so I think that will either continue or there'll be a further expansion on that. And again, that links through to point 1 about the housing market and stimulus for that. So I think that's probably something that will be in the budget. And in my opinion, I think business rates will continue, a discount on them or scrapping them for the minute, and then there'll be a permitted development rights, legislation or further information. So I hope that gives you some real good insights into what I think is going to be. Obviously, there are lots of other things which perhaps we don't normally touch on this channel, like fuel tax duty, alcohol, cigarettes, all that kind of stuff. I'd imagine all of those will go up. They're on a hit to get the motorist and the various people that drink alcohol and cigarettes. They want to push EV vehicles and so on. So there'll be some comments on that, I believe, which will help top up or pay back some of these things. And there'll probably be a roadmap out of the furlough scheme and all those rest of those things. But this business is primarily focusing on taxation, property, and the things that we generally talk about on this channel. So I hope you liked the video. Please do not forget to smash the like button below. Subscribe to the channel. If you would like to follow us on Facebook, there's a link in the Facebook description there, so you can get early notifications of videos. You can hit the notification bell in YouTube as well. You can also comment below. That helps grow the channel, along with subscribing and smashing the like button. And if you do want to get involved in the stock market, there's actually a couple of links below to platforms like Trading 212 and Freetrade, where you can actually get an ISA with them, which is a tax-free wrapper for any of your growth, so you can protect yourself against future taxation. Basically, when you credit some money with them, you get a free share. So it's valued up to £100 for, say, Trading 212, so it's up to £100 worth of free money. Normally you get 15 to 20 quid share, so it's well worth doing if you are considering investing. Obviously you need to take your own advice and do your own research in that, but there are plenty of channels, plenty of programs even, play in the playlists if you have a look through, that on my channel that cover the stock market and the various other things. So with that said, please don't forget to smash the like button, and I shall see you next time.